Jesus Freak here. I was watching one of Tim Frisch's videos and was rather surprised to find out that Nelson was actually well, you'll see. He did a review of a fancier version of this. Get this out of the way in case Angel decides to jump up. He reviewed a fancy version. This is just, and I get this out of the way, not a fan of these dust jackets. Pretty simple cover design here. It's a hardback. You pretty much expect the liner is going to be paper. Now, this is brand new 2023. Printed in South Korea. Now, I know they've printed stuff in South Korea before, but mostly been using China recently. Perhaps they decided that things were a little bit unstable given the current situation with Xi and Russia and all that. Now, the letter spacing seems to be a little bit tighter than I'm used to seeing with this 2K font. Yes, of course it's 2K. Now, there's a mystery here. Someone mentioned this. Where the heck did they get a translation of 3rd Maccabees? It's not in the King James translation. And I'll probably have to do some research afterwards to see what the heck they're using. It's obviously not the KJV. Anyway, after the table of contents, abbreviations of the books. There's an About the Bible section. Gives some history of the Bible in English, about the Apocrypha. It does talk about how things can be a bit hairy when it comes to acceptance of the Apocrypha. It varies from church to church, and there are books that some Orthodox churches accept that aren't even in here. And not all the books in the Apocrypha here are accepted, say, by the Church of Rome. The fact of the matter with the Church of Rome is they didn't really have a set definition up until Trent in the 16th century, and that was the reaction to us deciding not to include them. They do mention that there are potentials for allusions to the Apocrypha in the New Testament, which is one of the justifications the Church of Rome uses for keeping it. It's more a historical thing, in my opinion. Some churches in the Anglican tradition, even though they don't accept the Apocrypha as canon, they still occasionally quote from it. So there are uses for it, but Honestly, I'd prefer it to be a separate book. There's a How to Study the Bible section. Gives 7 different ways to study it. You know, 7's a big number here. Getting to know God. And then we go into the Old Testament. They've expanded on their book introductions. They're a little bit mealy-mouthed about Mosaic authorship of the Torah, but they don't deny it. And here's the basic layout in the Old and New Testaments. You have center column references, translation notes, not translators notes. The translation notes here are from Nelson. Note that there's no line in the middle of the columns. The sections have headings. These are, of course, added by Nelson. Now, from the end of the Old Testament, nothing up my sleeve, don't got much of a sleeve. Pull a lion out of my hat. First Esdras is rather interesting for what it is. It's an alternative edit of Ezra and part of Nehemiah. This also confirms that at one point Ezra and Nehemiah were one book. By the way, there's no references or notes in the Apocrypha. It's just straight text. Interesting that it states Second Esdras is being written by a Jew. I tend to believe it was written by a Christian. It certainly does say here it says the core of Second Esdras was probably written in Hebrew or Aramaic. I don't know about that. I think it might have been written in Greek. Soon after the Romans destroyed the temple in AD 70. The introduction and conclusion were written in Greek during the 2nd and 3rd centuries, respectively. Of course, this is a big reason we reject it. It's a supposedly Old Testament book written in the Christian era. Surprisingly, they had the Esther or extensions as the rest of Esther, where most Bibles I've seen just tag it as Esther. Though surprisingly, they've rewritten the title, which I think it's had in an older one, the rest of the Book of Esther or something. I have a Oxford Clarendon Apocrypha on the other side of the room. Don't really feel like digging that up right now. It has the introductory material to Sirach. There's a prologue, and then there's the translator's own prologue, which, by the way, mentions a threefold division of the Old Testament, when the translator refers to the law itself and the prophets and the rest of the books. The Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim, I think they're called. Hence the term Tanakh. The notes pretty much make it obvious that's why because it does have book intros even on the Apocrypha, as I've mentioned. The Epistle of Jeremy is, of course, included as Barak 6, as it usually is in KJV Apocrypha. Now, I'm curious about this translation of 3rd Maccabees. It's obviously done in the Jacobean language. It's written in the style of the KJV. But it's not part of the KJV, so what's it doing here, and where did they get it? And, of course, the Church of Rome doesn't accept 3rd Maccabees. It's a dark crimson red. It's not Words of Christ in neon pink, anything like that. I'm not really a fan of red letters, but it's a decent red letter. Subtle. Let's see what we got in the back. Between the Testaments. Little blurb here, a little essay that talks about the intertestamental period, probably because that's what the Apocrypha mostly covers. The history of the Red Letter Bible. That's interesting. Louis Klopsch, that developed the concept of the Red Letter Bible. Apparently he died here in Western New York and was buried in Tonawanda. That I didn't know. 30 Days of Getting to Know God. There's 30 sets of readings. It's not always one reading. Some are 3, 4, 5. 30 Days of Getting to Know Jesus. couple pages of note paper in the back, which you don't usually see in low-end Bibles. And the usual note regarding the type you find in 2K Bibles, and then you go on to the Zondervan maps. And so you see the two ribbons that are in here before I tuck them in the back. Anyway, Jesus freak out.